Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this edition of Career Conversations. I'm your host Farhan Yusuf as always, and today I'm really excited to, as a health professional, one of the things that I love exploring is allied health sciences, which we'll probably talk a little bit more about. But today we have our guest who will talk to us about physiotherapy. So Farzana, welcome to our session.
Thank you for having me.
Most welcome. Well, let's start by hearing more about your background, and just telling us maybe what physiotherapy is and why you got into that career.
My name is Farzana Hasham. I am a physiotherapist. I've been practicing for 10 years and I've been working in the public sector. And now recently I've moved to Dar es Salaam and I'm working in the private sector. What got me into physiotherapy is, so when I was young, I knew I wanted to do something in health, but I didn't want to be a doctor. But then I read about physiotherapy. So physiotherapy is basically treating patients with alternative medicine, which mainly is physical exercises. But we do have other therapies like manual therapy, we have water therapy, heat therapy. So everything that is with medication, but in a long term. And some patients, for example, if they can't have medicines, physiotherapy helps. But also in rehabilitation means someone who gets injured, someone who has musculoskeletal pain. So physiotherapy helps them bring back to their function. So basically it's a functional path to bring person back to what they are doing. Yeah. Okay. So it's mostly functional, yeah. So when I kept reading on it, it got me more interested and I knew that was my path.
Okay.
And it's amazing.
It's always nice to talk to people who are very happy about their careers. I definitely relate to the wanted to do health but not doctor
Yes.
side of things, because it was the same for me. Farzana, a few steps before that, I think it's always nice for our audience to get to know you. Where did you do your primary school? Just give our audience a little bit of your background in that space.
Right. So I was born and brought up in Dar es Salaam. So I did my education in Al-Muntazir. So Al-Muntazir, nursery, primary, secondary. And then I went to KCMC, so Kilimanjaro Christian Medical College, which is in Moshi. I did my 4 years there. I graduated in 2014. And then after that, I moved to Zanzibar. And I fell in love with the place. And then I was volunteering at the government hospital, Nazimoja Hospital. It's the referral hospital there. So I was volunteering there and I saw so many opportunities there in the sense of like the patient number, because whenever you're out of school, you need that practice, hands-on practice. So I saw a great opportunity and I went there. And one thing about working in the government is that they encourage you to train more and more and more. So in between, I got a lot of small trainings for skill development. And eventually then I did my master's in public health and I graduated in 2022. So that's my education journey so far. And recently this year, I decided that I want to challenge myself again. And I talked to a few friends who advised me that I should broaden my perspective in the mainland. And I'm here now.
Thank you, Farzana. So much
Yes.
to unpack in what you have just mentioned. I mean,
Yes.
I also love how your journey, I feel, has been mostly, for lack of a better word, local in Tanzania, because
Yes.
I'm a huge proponent of, local education and for people to continue serving in our countries in Africa. So, a bit about, so you did your bachelor's program at KCMC?
Yes.
and that's good to know, because I feel like even for careers like physiotherapy, I'm quite sure I have had conversations with people where they feel like it's a course that's somehow not available locally, and many people I've met or interacted with who want to go and do it in India, etc. So I think that's good information for people to know. And I think on that note, just a piece of advice, we should keep checking into like the prospectuses of many of our local universities, because I do know that there are courses that are being increased on a regular basis, right? So there are so many courses that I've seen even in recent times being brought that are quite interesting, fascinating, and go a long way. So bachelor's there. Is there an internship program for physiotherapists?
Yes. So recently they have developed in the new curriculum that you have to do internship. So it's 4-year degree and then 1-year internship, and then you can practice. But I would also like to add on the local education. I'm proudly Tanzanian, so I always kept that I want to study locally, because at the end of the day, I'm treating locally, right? The contest, culture, everything is very important when you're treating, especially something that is hands-on. So there are universities here. In fact, in the degree program, there is in Mwimbili University and KSMC. But diploma, there are many places. There is in Zanzibar. I mean, I'm a proud teacher. I was teaching in Zanzibar at the State University of Zanzibar. Then there is at KCMC a diploma program, and then there is one in Dodoma, in UDOM, University of Dodoma. Then there is one in Mbeya. Now these are all diploma courses, but it's a great start, even if someone finishes Form 4 and they want to take up certificate, why not? So yeah, locally.
Definitely. And another sort of interesting thing about your career journey, which we don't hear much about generally, I think, is the fact that you have worked in the public sector or in the government system, which I know a lot of young people tend to shy away from. I know you've already mentioned that one of the advantages of it was that there's a lot of training, etc., which is something that I feel I have experienced as well, because I work quite closely with the government in Tanzania, especially the health sector. What else did you enjoy about the public sector?
Right. So I think the most I enjoyed is that where I was working, it was a teaching hospital. So a big part of what I did was become a clinical supervisor, as well as I was treating patients, as well as I was giving lectures at the State University. So that became a very big part of what I did. But in order to do that, you have to also get the skills. So I think for me, the biggest thing was getting the skills. The second being that you will see in the government hospitals, especially because Nazimoja was a free clinic. So you will see all kinds of patients, starting from someone who probably has just a shoulder injury, someone with back pain, like musculoskeletal, to people who have like head injuries, who are severely disabled. So you would train in everything. And there would be a lot of community outreach, which is one thing that I am very passionate about, community outreach and community rehabilitation. And that's one thing that you will not see in private practice, that people will be going out of their way, I mean, we had programs, of course, to go and do this. It's part of our job description. But otherwise, in other sectors, you won't see that. So I think that I enjoyed a lot.
Okay. So I guess and of course, different people are motivated by different things as far as their career journeys are concerned. But I guess if you are motivated by the spirit of service, then I think there's probably a lot more scope for that in the public sector, or at least in working as closely with the public sector as possible. So the next thing that I would love to know about is something, again, you've already mentioned, this whole aspect of teaching, right? How was that for you? Because I feel like that's also one career that is very important, but somehow is losing its shine over the years. Like it's very hard for me to talk to someone right now and hear that they want to become a teacher. And many a times I get quite nervous about that, because I'm like, that means that either we are not going to have any teachers in the future, or we are going to have people who are becoming teachers just because they don't have anything else to do, which is, so maybe your passion towards teaching can be a bit infectious through this podcast.
Hopefully. I absolutely love teaching. There's two reasons. The first thing is that when you're teaching, the growth that you see in a person that starts off, their first year, they're just fresh from school, all looking blank, and then by the time they finish their diploma, because I used to teach diploma students, train them to be also in the hospital. And then when you see them complete their education, it's just so fulfilling seeing them, graduate. And now I have students who are in the military. Some of them are working in sports teams. I have people all over Tanzania, students, So every time when I go somewhere and I see them doing well for themselves, it's a very proud moment. So that I think all teachers can relate in all levels. Even if it's like a primary student, a secondary, that fulfillment that you get when you see them achieving something in life, it's amazing. The second thing is a personal reason, that whenever I teach, because I'm very passionate about it, when I enter a class, I forget everything. The only thing I remember is that the things that I want to tell them, and I really enjoy because I add a lot of humor in it. And teaching physiotherapy is very skill-based. So there is a lot of like practical skills, practical classes. So I enjoy that a lot as well. So that is why. And why did I get into teaching? So basically in Zanzibar, we had very few physios. And we had to develop because the demand was high, because people start knowing what physio is. And basically, especially for every musculoskeletal condition, eventually you will be sent to physio for a continuation program or rehabilitation. So the demand was very high. So the Danish government supported a project in Nazimoja to open up the diploma program. Now, luckily, when I just started working at Nazimoja Hospital, they started the program. Obviously, I did not start teaching initially because I had to develop my skills for teaching as well. And then they say that now we need you to start teaching, like 2 years in. And I think that was the best decision I made. Because obviously it's nerve-wracking. You know that you have done physiotherapy, you're just treating patients, and now they give you an added thing, to stand in front of people and, teach. It's a big responsibility, but it's best decision I made.
Great to hear that. And I mean, I just to remind our audience, I think our initial intention of starting this podcast has always been to highlight what I would call, for lack of a better word, the less popular careers and make them more popular. And I feel there are so many fields within allied health sciences, right? We have physiotherapy, we have occupational therapy, we have things like audiology, even optometry, I would say, to a certain extent. There are so many of these allied health sciences, allied health careers that a lot of people don't tend to think about. Whenever we are talking about health, it's, doctor, pharmacist, dentist.
True.
We don't even see that many of nurses, to be honest. And so I think, we hope that through these kinds of conversations, we can create a more awareness about that. So from physiotherapy, working in the public sector, teaching, to a master's in public health, what was the driver there?
So naturally, because I was working in the public sector, I was inclined more to, in community work, which made me take the public health. But I had a couple of other reasons as well. I had played multiple leadership roles during that time, and I was going to be the head of the department eventually. So we were just, literally the head of department said that I'm retiring soon and I want you to. So it was a skill set that I had to get, getting the master's. The second reason is my love for community outreach. And there was always a gap between the hospital and the community, in the sense that you would have a patient that comes in, you would treat them, especially those people like with more like severe disabilities. You know that their whole life they're going to be, having that disability. So there was a gap. They would have like social problems, they would have financial problems. And then me personally, it wasn't part of my job description, but personally I would start looking for people like donors, sponsors. I would go like to the government offices also to say that this person needs more help. I would look for like assistive devices. Eventually, if you go see the description of what public health is that. So that was another thing. The third thing, I was part of a charity organization in Zanzibar that we would do a lot of community outreach work, but it was more for infrastructure, just social issues, water, food, and all this. But whenever I would go to the villages, I would make sure that if I see a person having disabilities of any kind, we as a group, we would facilitate them to come to Mnazi Moja. Whatever it is, they would come and it would improve their quality of life. So that was so fulfilling, again, and rewarding as well. So that all these factors thought, I was like, I'm not going to do a master's in physiotherapy, because honestly in Tanzania, the job descriptions are very blurred between a diploma, degree and master's. So public health was my choice. And then eventually I used it in my building my portfolio, but at the same time, it added to the experience that I already had over the years.
Okay. Again, I guess the lesson I draw from that is just being more intentional about why you're doing.
Choosing
because
a
yes,
career, yeah.
Well, career and also especially a master's program,
yeah.
because I feel like, that's also something, and I speak to a lot of youngsters, and this is something I'm constantly talking about, where masters especially has become more of a tick box, where everyone wants to do it just so that they are able to land a job or something like that, but not really being intentional about why they're doing this masters or where it's supposed to take them, which for me has always been the purpose of a master's, right? Like, one, I think it's very important to do a master's program after you've had some amount of work experience, because I think in the master's program you're supposed to build on things that you've already seen on the ground, and your journey becomes so much more fulfilling. But then also being intentional about it, like knowing, I know people who have collected master's degrees, but when you ask them like, how are you using this, has it helped you in any way, it's not really useful in that sense. And I think what's, as I keep mentioning, Farzana, what's good about your journey is that I see and I hope the viewers will as well, so many different facets of a career, right? From starting from a very skill-based career to getting into teaching, doing or providing services in the public sector, which is extremely unique, and then going on to doing a master's, and now back to practicing again, right? So I think the other sort of lesson there for people thinking about their careers is that you have to sort of be adaptable. You have to see what comes your way, and you need to allow yourself to explore. Of course, having a support system helps a lot, and the kind of people that you can seek advice from and get guidance from. But then I think also internally, you need to be very sort of ready to try different things and just be a bit open-minded about where your journey takes you. So back to practice of physiotherapy, Farzana, what does a day in the life of a physiotherapist look like, and what does your space look like? Because I think I have seen a lot of like cool looking machines and gadgets and appliances in physiotherapy rooms. So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
So currently I work at Ibrahim Haji. So it's in private practice now. So I left everything behind in Zanzibar to explore more options here. So my day starts with we do ward rounds to see inpatients, whoever requires that, and then we start the clinic. So I'm at the clinic from 9 o'clock after the ward round, 9 to 5, and then I do home visits. So there are some patients who cannot come, maybe due to severe disability or just elderly patients, because the wait time is more when you're here at the clinic. So that's basically it. And in my free time, I am doing part-time. I'm working with an NGO in Canada. So then in the evening, then I give them a little bit of my time. So that's how my day is right now. But speaking of the machines, so basically a physio room is, we have many parts to it. So we have, like I said, that a lot of alternative therapies. So we have electrotherapy, we have heat therapy, we have cryotherapy, then we have manual therapy. I cannot explain all this right now, but so you'll see all, and then we have exercise therapy. So you'll see a lot of physiotherapy rooms have a gym, which is equipped with all exercise equipments. But all this helps in treating the patients. So for example, if a patient comes in and they're in a lot of pain, then we would be using maybe electrotherapy to help them reduce pain. You see, the main thing that we use is exercise therapy. But if a patient is in a lot of pain, then you need to bring the pain down first and make them comfortable, and then start your exercise therapy. So all those cool gadgets are to make the patients mostly pain management.
Okay. And so all of those machines are related to all of these different therapies that you're talking about. Yeah. And all that is related to basically the condition of the patient and what the patient requires. Okay, which is great. And I think the good thing about having these conversations around physiotherapy right now is because I feel globally there's a lot more conversation now about disability and something that you mentioned earlier, quality of life, right? Where we are thinking about health not just from the point of view of are you sick or not, but like how do we improve your quality of life. And for people living with disabilities, that becomes a big part of whether or not they're able to achieve their potential, etc. So it's a good time to get into these kinds of conversations and these spaces and these careers.
Maybe maybe I could add to that. The reason, so back in a few years ago, if we would be speaking about disabilities, it would be something that there was not much attention to it. But if you see the recent trend in the diseases that we see, they're more chronic conditions. So we call them non-communicable disease, you know that. So the recent trends in like diabetes, patients with heart conditions, mental health. You would not believe how many patients I see that have something stressing them out, which then shows in their body like as pain, somatic symptoms. So because of a rise in this, there is a lot of demand for physiotherapy right now, but we do not have enough people. Like if you see in our community, I would literally just count in like 3 or 4. So it's something that I am encouraging, especially the male. If there's a student who wants to consider taking up this, I encourage a lot, because we do not have male physiotherapists in our community. So I'm just adding to what you were saying. Yeah, there is a demand to
Yeah, and I find that quite interesting, because I think one of my questions was going to be for you, how is it being a female physiotherapist? Because I think there is this perception of, it's a very physical career and all of that. So there's always some kind of, discomfort that people have, that parents might have when they are, when their daughter comes and says, I want to be a physiotherapist, I feel like there might be perceptions that people have. So it would be great to hear, your experience as a female physiotherapist. But I have had this discussion, yes, which is very ironic, that you would think that because many people, when they think of physiotherapy, they're thinking about, sports and football, and that guy who walks up to the player when the player falls down. But somehow it's not been, transcribed into a career for men. So definitely, thank you very much for bringing that up. And I hope, from the audience listening, we do manage to inspire some young men to get into that space. But yes, to your experience as a female physiotherapist, and also, if you are comfortable sharing the perception of your family about that when you first told them you want to be a physiotherapist, were there any apprehensions?
So I think the general public perception of physiotherapy is massage. And because of that, it's why people are more reluctant, because then they would be categorized as a massage therapist. But then that's the clear line I drew when I was researching and also in my practice, is that there are so many therapies that can be done, and like I've mentioned so many of them. So that would not be it, and it's more of exercises. So even if you have to be creative, honestly, with your therapy. So that's one aspect where I see the reluctance. But you see, it's a very dynamic path. You could be, I did mention that I have students like in military, and all that, in sports teams, and it's just, I have male students as well who do physio. But what I'm trying to say, in the community, like, I don't know if they find it like a feminine profession, that's why. But you can work in anywhere. You can even work in a gym if you do not want to do, just clinic based. So for me, my family have been very supportive of my career choices, and that's because there were people in my family who had like musculoskeletal conditions, and they would go to physiotherapy, and I would see the changes that they get after doing especially exercise therapy, because then I would sit with them, and even though I had no clue what they were doing at that point, and I'm talking about when I was in O levels, I had like dear family members who would, suddenly just get like a really severe spasm, and then what? And then they would go to physio and they would get better. So I'm like, okay, this is really helping. Whatever these people are doing, it's really helping. So that was also one of the reasons why I chose this path. So yeah, no, my family have been very supportive, and supportive throughout, like all these decisions. If you see, you said my journey, and hearing it again, it's very dynamic. So I'm not someone that, I think the important thing that you said is that explore your options, try to, be dynamic about your career, So they have been supportive of that as well.
Okay. And something that you mentioned earlier, Farzana, because I've spoken to a few physiotherapist friends, and they tell me that, you are a lot of a counselor. A lot of the job of a
Yes.
physiotherapist is just listening and letting your patients, your clients sort of, just
Vent out.
share and vent. And what's that experience like?
Oh yes, that's one thing that I always say. If you want to take this path, then you have to have empathy. You have to put yourself in their shoes, and at the same time, you should have the skills of talking to people. in the sense that you will hear the most bizarre stories and you have to take it all in. So it can be a bit emotionally exhausting sometimes, because especially when the patient has a lot of like chronic pain, and if they also have like mental stresses as well. So you have to be a good counselor, and thankfully, gratefully, you can say that my patients do say that you are a very good listener. So that's one thing that you have to have. It's a skill set that you have to know how to talk to people. You have to know how to give feedback, as well as be an empath. Yeah, empathy is important.
Now that's good for the audiences to listen, because we always like to sort of bring out the kind of skills that people need to thrive in these different careers. So that's good to know. Farzana, and of course, without mentioning names, but any particular moment or incident in your career where you are like, this is why I chose physiotherapy, and it just made you feel so good, and maybe more from the practice side. I know you've mentioned about how training and teaching and all of that made you feel, but from a practice point of view, any moment that you can think of that really made you feel good about being a physiotherapist?
Multiple. I mean, the one thing that this job is very rewarding, in the sense that because it's very hands-on, you won't see like the patient only once. The thing about physiotherapy is, because it's a gradual process, you would be seeing their changes day by day. So be it like when a child starts walking first, be it a person who was on bed, they start sitting, and their pain, even when a person like has so much pain and then you see them start smiling and being themselves. I feel like that's one thing that it's a feeling. You see, it's usually when you prescribe medicine to someone as a pharmacist, as a doctor, you will see them once, and then if they come for follow-up, then yes. If not, then you know that they are feeling better. But this is something that is so gradual and it's so small, like you have to keep encouraging them. And because you see them, I have patients I've seen for like 6 months, you will create a bond. So the blessings then you get, like a lot of duas. So I feel like it's very rewarding. And a particular story, maybe recent, I had a patient who had a badminton player. He was 50, but he really was passionate about playing. And he tore his knee ligament. And because of that, and at that time, he could not fly to India because of the pain. It was like grade 4, which is like severe. And he's like, I don't want to get my surgery done locally. I'm like, okay, fine, let's start physio. We did for 6 months in, and then he went back to playing badminton, because without surgery, his symptoms got better. He started playing again, and every time he would play, he would like send me pictures of his trophies. So and then one fine day, he's like, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I feel fine. If a worst case scenario, I'll take painkillers. I was like, fine. So we started training for that. We trained, he reached the peak. So I feel like that for him was an accomplishment, because it was something impossible when his symptoms started, because his knee was done. But reaching to the peak, it was amazing. So that's one story that inspired me also, that like, oh, if he could do it with his injury, then you can strive for that, So that's one story, was very significant for me.
And it's definitely a good story. I mean, I get envious of physiotherapists, because I think you all get to see resilience in practice, right? Like a lot of us hear about this term resilience and, adapting and like pushing through and all those things. But I really feel physiotherapy is one of those careers where you actually get to see that in practice. You actually get to see people be resilient and overcome their disabilities and their challenges, etc., which I think is beautiful in its own way. So I think I am done, Farzana, with my questions for today. But before we end, any last sort of advice, guidance, thoughts for especially young students who might be thinking about their career choices and want to pursue physiotherapy or are even thinking about it?
So, like I mentioned earlier, that there is a huge gap where there are not many physiotherapists. So, and there is a rise of chronic conditions. So, there is a job demand. The second thing is it's a very flexible job. So, for example, if you do not want to work in a clinical setting, you can work in gyms, you can work in pools, you can work in military, you can work in sports teams. You can choose. You can even work as a freelancer. I have many of my friends who just choose to just freelance, like do home visits, so they can adjust their timings. It's a fairly higher paying job, I would say. If you see that recently there's been a shift where, because the GPs are so many, the medical doctors, and there are few of this, so there is even a higher demand and then higher demand is higher pay. So that's one thing. And because you'll see a patient over multiple times, so if someone is looking into like financial gain, it's also a good path. Another thing, like I mentioned, it's very satisfying because it's hand-on experiences and hands-on patient care. So it's very rewarding as well. So if you're an empath and you like giving services to people, you should do this. The downside, like I mentioned, is the emotion and the physical exhaustion. So sometimes listening to a lot of stories, imagine a person is telling you their story for an hour and they feel good about it, and then you have like 10 patients doing the same thing. So that, and physically demanding, because you would have like patients with disability who cannot even lift their leg, or hand. So sometimes you have to use your physical strength to make them able. So in lifting patients, in moving and exercising. So it's a little bit physical demanding as well. Yeah.
It's like being a therapist on a treadmill, I guess. And yeah, so, well, I would say, thank you for all that you do as a physiotherapist. I do hope that through this conversation, we are able to create some kind of awareness, as I said earlier, and I keep saying all the time, allied health sciences, we definitely need more of that. I feel like we are living in an environment where even for the slightest injuries, people think of an orthopedic surgeon before they even think of a physiotherapist, which, we many a times talk about how we have inverted health sector dynamics here compared to other countries where you have, more allied health sciences and less specialists.
Yes.
Our pyramid is inverted where we have more specialists and lesser allied health people, which just is challenging in so many different ways. So thank you for everything that you do, and we hope that you are able to inspire other people. I also, because you're so passionate about teaching, and I believe as you are shooting this podcast, it's a little close to Teachers Day that just happened. So happy Teachers Day to you.
Thank
and also
you.
to all those teachers who are such a critical part of these careers, right? We have all these career conversations, but the people who truly enable us to have those careers are our teachers, lecturers, professors, etc. So ending on a happy Teachers Day to everyone out there. And yeah, tune in to our next session. We look forward to having more career conversations.